Energy for the future, using our resources better. In the interview, Physics Nobel Prize winner Stephen Chu.
Professor Chu, President Obama has announced that the US wants to take on a leading role in preventing climate change. Is that realistic from your point of view? After all, the US is the second largest emitter of CO2 in the world after China.
I think that's all the reason why the United States has to be a leader in reducing its carbon emissions and becoming a leader in developing those technologies that the world will need. It's because of the fact that we are a leader in carbon emissions, and China and the US have to lead the world.
But why has it taken so long up to now?
Well, we live in a democracy, and I know very well what the president believes and feels, and the responsibility of doing this, but also the opportunity, both for the United States economy and the world economy, to get to a sustainable world. And so why it's taken so long is because not everybody in the United States, not both parties, agree that this is the right thing to do.
Could you describe the opportunities from your point of view?
Sure. Any society, any country that uses energy in a much more efficient way means you get the goods and services produced with less energy, less investment of money through energy. If you develop those technologies, you have a world market. You have a world market in developing countries to build the buildings and cars and all the infrastructure in a much more energy efficient way. If you're the leader of these technologies, you could be a leader in this world market. This is why China is now the biggest deployer of renewable energy in the world, wind and solar, not deployer in their country. For this year, they're going to be the biggest deployer because they also see, not only for themselves, the need to transition to sustainable energy, they also see a need and an opportunity to develop products that they can ship around the world.
But I mean, China is also the biggest CO2 emitter.
Yes, that's correct. It's the biggest CO2 emitter because a lot of its electricity is from coal. They have 1.3 billion people in their world, and so when you have that many people getting with a very rapidly growing economy, that's an issue. I mean, the United States has, what, 350 million people, so it too is a large number of people, but not like China, not like India. And China wants very much to diversify its energy supply. It's heavy dependence on coal because they know that the way they use coal now is deeply polluting, and it has profound ramifications on the health of their citizens, let alone the CO2 emissions in the world.
Now you are saying that renewable energies, for example, can bring economic progress as well. Looking at Europe, how do you see Europe in this competition?
Well, Europe has an opportunity, but it has to trade energy and use the energy resources within Europe across countries, which creates more of a challenge. I think when you go to the northern latitudes, there's less sun than in the southern latitudes. You do have energy storage in the form of pump hydro storage, but it's in only a limited number of places, mostly in Switzerland, a little bit in Austria. So it's more difficult than it is, for example, in the United States, which has vast tracts of very lightly populated regions, lots of sun, lots of wind. And yet in the United States, we have not yet taken full advantage of that. Europe will have to go across country.
So you are saying the US has a competitive advantage, do I understand you correctly?
It has an inherent competitive advantage because of its renewable resources. We have, but also we have a disincentive, namely we have an incredible fossil fuel resources as well. And so for that reason, probably the fact that we did have fossil fuel resources, both oil, gas, and coal, that we didn't grow as efficient an economy as Europe, which had fewer of those resources. Going forward, this is something, again, good for the United States. To use those resources more efficiently means that you have a more powerful economy.
Now looking at Germany, Germany is playing a different role. They want to bet on renewable energies a lot. 80% are supposed to be renewables by 2020. Is that a realistic target from your point of view?
Well, I frankly don't really know whether you can get to 80%. I think their heart is in absolutely right place, but on the other hand, I would have hoped that perhaps they would have let their nuclear reactors retire more gracefully, and instead of bringing them to an end more quickly. But that again, that's a choice the German citizens have to make. So it's not for me to say what Germany should do. I do applaud what they are trying to do in renewables, because they're one of several countries setting an example of this. We have to go into this direction in order to get true sustainability, not only in energy, but in water, in agriculture, and all these things. Germany has been a leader in this.
You are saying that fighting climate change is only possible if we also use nuclear energy for some time still. Is that correct?
From my personal point of view, for this century, nuclear energy should be part of no carbon or very low carbon emission, if you look at the life cycle costs, as part of the energy mix. My hope is that renewable energy and energy storage and transmission will be enough that you need very little fossil fuel, and you may not need nuclear, because it's economically better. But we do need a diverse energy supply. You can't land on just one or two things. We will need transportation fuels, particularly for airplanes, and so in that sense, now that's not to say it doesn't say we have to be using oil. We will need liquid fuel, but that can be renewable as well. It all depends on the technology, how quickly it develops, where the price points come in. But I think the incentive is the necessity of the invention, namely without the fact that we have to greatly decrease the carbon emissions of the world. This has to point us in this direction, because otherwise we run great risks.
The disaster of Fukushima, did it change your view on nuclear power?
No, not really. I think that was a very, very serious accident. You have to design reactors, future reactors, if you're going to have reactors, that are what we call passively safe. And what that means is you have no control of the reactor from an electrical point of view. You have no water supply. You're cut off from the water supply of the infrastructure. And yet the possibility of significant radiation leak is very, very low, that you will not have a meltdown. And that's what we mean by passively safe. There's enough thermal inertia that even if you lose complete control, the whole reactor glides down.
That's a theory, or is it possible already?
Well, I think right now, the reactors that we're trying to design, as the smaller modular reactors, the requirement would be that you design them to be passively safe. The style reactors that went in Fukushima were actually they were GE Mark I's. They were first generation of the boiling water reactors of General Electric. So they were not designed in that way. That is not to say, and you continue to upgrade the existing reactors. Okay.
Now, the US wants to be less dependent on energy imports, so they're betting on shale gas and the increased use of shale gas. What kind of environmental impacts does that have from your point of view?
Well, it really depends on how one develops any resources. If you look at any mining operation, and shale gas, like oil drilling, like natural gas drilling in general, is somewhat of a mining operation. You can do things, there are 101 ways to do things incorrectly that will have profoundly bad impact on the environment. Both in the North Sea and in the Gulf of Mexico, we've seen very bad blowouts that have done a lot of pollution. But you can mitigate against those blowouts and against those accidents, and you can take measures. With shale gas, the last thing you want is a pollution of a major water table, a fresh water table. That would be very, very bad for the industry, because if that happens, I think many people in states around the United States will say, no more of this.
Do you see the risk?
Well, there is a certain risk. I think the biggest risks are that when you inject the water in, you bring the water back up. The water brings back heavy metals. You have to properly treat that water. You can't simply put it into a municipal sewage plant, because those sewage plants are not designed to process essentially water that's been underground and has bring up residue heavy metals. These shale resources are very deep, thousands of feet underground, and well below the water tables. But what you don't want are fugitive emissions and cracks in the rock that can then leak out. Now that is not dangerous for your health, but it means that you have methane leaking out of the atmosphere. Now, economically, that's not good. You'd rather save it to recover.
In short words, what's your vision?
My vision of a better future is that we do the things we've been doing. We have been used to a certain lifestyle. We don't have to give up that lifestyle, but we can do it in a much more sustainable way. The same lifestyle, even a better lifestyle, without use of so much energy. So this is the century. We have to learn how to transition to sustainability. And so that much more of the world can live a middle-class existence and not use up the world's resources. The way we're doing it today, we're using up several world resources. But is it possible to do that? Absolutely.
Professor Chu, thank you very much.
You're welcome.